The winter wind cut through the streets of Cedar Falls, Montana, like a knife through butter. Emma Hartwell pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, but it did little to keep out the cold that had settled deep into her bones. At 32 years old, she felt ancient. Widowed for 6 months, penniless, and with nowhere to go, she had spent the last 3 nights sleeping in the abandoned livery stable at the edge of town. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The charity of Cedar Falls had run dry after the fire that claimed half the town's wheat supply. Everyone was struggling. No one had room for a widow with no skills, no family, and no prospects. Emma sat on the bench outside the general store, watching the townspeople hurry past. No one met her eyes anymore. She had become invisible, just another piece of the landscape they chose not to see. That's when she heard them. 2 small voices, chattering like birds. "Papa said we could buy peppermint sticks if we finish our chores. I want the red ones, not the white ones." "You always want the red ones, Lily." Emma looked up to see 2 identical girls, no more than 6 years old, with golden braids and bright blue eyes. They wore matching wool coats and little boots that looked warm and sturdy. Twins, they reminded her of the daughters she would never have. The girls stopped in front of her, their innocent faces full of curiosity rather than judgment. "Are you cold, Mom?" one of them asked. Emma's throat tightened. "I'm all right, sweetheart." "You don't look all right," the other twin said matter-of-factly. "You're shaking." "Lily, that's not polite," her sister whispered loudly. "But it's true, Rose. Look at her." The girls studied Emma with the brutal honesty of children. She wanted to shrink away, to disappear, but their faces held no cruelty, only concern. "Do you have a home?" Rose asked gently. Emma's eyes stung. She shook her head, unable to speak. The twins exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations that only twins seem to have. Then Lily nodded decisively. "You should come home with us," she announced. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "Our papa is real big and strong," Rose explained. "He can help you. He helps everyone. He fixed Mrs. Patterson's roof when it leaked," Lily added. "And he gave Mr. Chen wood for his stove when he ran out." "No, girls, I'm sure your father wouldn't want a stranger." "Papa says we should always help people who need it," Rose insisted. "And you need help." Before Emma could protest further, each girl had taken one of her hands, their small, warm fingers wrapped around hers, and something inside her chest cracked open. When was the last time someone had touched her with kindness? "Come on," Lily urged, tugging gently. "It's not far." Emma found herself being led down the main street, past the blacksmith and the church, toward the edge of town, where the larger properties began. The girls kept up a steady stream of chatter, telling her about their chickens, their horse named Butterscotch, and their papa, who was the strongest man in all of Montana. "He can lift a whole barrel of flour," Rose said proudly. "He's taller than the doorframe," Lily added. "He has to duck, and his voice is really deep. Sometimes it sounds like thunder." Emma's steps slowed. This was a terrible idea. What kind of man would react to his daughter's bringing home a homeless woman? He would likely be furious, and rightfully so. She should turn back now, make an excuse. But the girl's hands were so warm in hers, and she was so tired, so desperately tired. They turned onto a long drive, lined with cottonwood trees. At the end stood a large ranch house, well-maintained, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Barns and outbuildings dotted the property. This was clearly the home of a successful man. Emma's stomach twisted with shame. What was she doing here? "Papa! Papa!" the girls called out as they approached the house. The front door opened and Emma's breath caught. The man who emerged was immense. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorway. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his jaw was covered with several days' worth of stubble. He wore work clothes, simple denim and flannel, but they did nothing to diminish his imposing presence. His eyes were the same brilliant blue as his daughter's, but where theirs sparkled with innocence, his held shadows. This was a man who had known loss. Those eyes landed on Emma, and she felt pinned in place. His gaze moved over her, taking in her worn clothing, her too thin frame, her wind-chapped hands. His expression was unreadable. "Papa, this is—" Rose paused. "We don't know your name." "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Hartwell." "We found her in town," Lily explained. "She's cold and doesn't have a home, so we brought her here." The man's jaw tightened. He looked at his daughters, then back at Emma. The silence stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. "I'm sorry. The girls were very kind. But I shouldn't have come. I'll go." She started to pull her hands free from the twins' grip. "No!" both girls cried simultaneously. "Papa, we have to help her," Rose pleaded. The man continued to stare at Emma. She forced herself to meet his gaze, though everything in her wanted to run. She saw him take a deep breath, his broad chest expanding. "What happened to your husband?" His voice was indeed deep, like distant thunder. "He died 6 months ago. Pneumonia." The words came out flat. She had said them so many times they had lost all meaning. Family, none living. Work. Emma's shame deepened. I was a wife. I kept house. I can cook and clean and sew, but no one in town is hiring. Not with so many struggling after the fire." He nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. Then, to her shock, he stepped aside. "Come in out of the cold. I don't want to impose. You're already here," he said simply. "And my daughters don't bring home strays for no reason. Last time it was a 3-legged dog. Time before that, a baby rabbit with a broken ear." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I suppose a woman is an improvement." Despite everything, Emma felt a surprised laugh bubble up. The girls giggled. "Papa, that's not nice," Rose scolded, but she was grinning. "The truth isn't always nice," he replied, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. "But it's still the truth. Now come inside before you freeze to death on my porch. I won't have that on my conscience." The girls pulled Emma forward, and she stumbled over the threshold into warmth. The house smelled like wood smoke and something cooking. Stew, maybe. It was clean and orderly, with simple furniture and curtains at the windows. A woman's touch, though Emma sensed no woman currently lived here. "Boots off," the man instructed his daughters, who immediately began unlacing. He looked at Emma's feet and frowned. "Those won't keep you warm through winter." Emma looked down at her worn boots, the soles nearly through. "They're all I have." He grunted, a sound she couldn't interpret. "Girls, take Mrs. Hartwell to the kitchen. Get her some stew. I'll be back." He strode down the hallway, his heavy footsteps making the floorboards creak. Emma watched him go, bewildered. "Don't worry," Rose whispered. "Papa seems scary, but he's not. He's just quiet. And grumpy sometimes," Lily added, "especially since Mama died." Emma's heart clenched. So he was a widower too. That explained the shadows in his eyes, the careful way he had looked at her, as if seeing his own pain reflected back. The girls led her to a warm kitchen with a cast-iron stove and a large wooden table. They settled her in a chair and ladled out a generous portion of beef stew, setting it before her with a hunk of fresh bread. Emma stared at the food, her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you crying?" Lily asked, alarmed. "Is the stew bad?" "No, sweetheart." Emma wiped her eyes quickly. "It's perfect. You're both perfect. I just thank you." She ate slowly, savoring every bite. The girls sat on either side of her, watching with satisfaction. "What are your names?" Emma asked. "I know one of you is Rose and one is Lily, but I don't know who is who." "I'm Rose," said the girl on her left. "I have a freckle right here." She pointed to a tiny mark near her ear. "And I'm Lily. I have one on my wrist." She displayed the small freckle proudly. "How will I remember which is which?" Emma asked, smiling despite her exhaustion. "Rose is older by 4 minutes," Lily said. "And she's bossier." "I'm not." "R2. You always tell me what to do." "That's because you always do things wrong, girls." The deep voice cut through their bickering. The man had returned, carrying a bundle of clothing. "Give Mrs. Hartwell some peace." He set the bundle on the table. Emma saw it was women's clothing, a wool dress, a warm shawl, thick stockings. Her breath caught. "These were my wife's," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "They've been packed away for 2 years. No sense in letting them go to waste." Emma's hands trembled as she touched the soft wool. "I can't accept." "You can, and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "You'll freeze in what you're wearing." His eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce there. "I won't have another woman die on my watch because she was too proud to accept help." The words hung in the air. Emma understood then. His wife. She must have died from something he felt he could have prevented. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He seemed surprised by the question. "Garrett. Garrett Bishop." "Mr. Bishop, just Garrett." He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking uncomfortable. "Look, Mrs. Hartwell." "Emma, please." "Emma." He said her name carefully, as if testing how it felt. "My daughters brought you here because they have good hearts. Too good, probably. They haven't learned yet that the world isn't always kind." His jaw tightened. "But they're right that you need help, and I have space. The old housekeeper's room is empty. Has been since Mrs. Chen passed last spring. Emma's eyes widened. You're offering me a room? I'm offering you work, he corrected. I need someone to keep house, cook meals, look after the girls when I'm out working the ranch. In exchange, you get room, board, and a small wage. Nothing fancy, but enough to save up for whatever comes next. It was too much, too generous. Emma felt tears threaten again. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I could be anyone. Garrett's expression softened slightly. My girls are good judges of character, better than most adults. If they trust you enough to bring you home, that's good enough for me. He paused. Besides, you have honest eyes, sad but honest. Emma didn't know what to say. This man, this stranger, was offering her a lifeline when everyone else in town had looked away. I'll work hard, she promised, her voice thick with emotion. I'll earn my keep. I promise you won't regret this. See that I don't. But his tone wasn't harsh. If anything, it was almost gentle. Can she stay in the room next to ours, Papa? Rose asked hopefully. The housekeeper's room is downstairs, near the kitchen, Garrett said. More appropriate. But then, she'll be all alone, Lily protested. She's a grown woman, not a child, Garrett replied. She needs privacy. He looked at Emma. The room is small but clean, has a good stove. You'll be warm. It sounds perfect, Emma said honestly. Warm and safe. Two things she hadn't been in months. Garrett nodded. Girls, show her the room. Let her get settled. Supper is at 6. He looked at Emma. I expect you'll want to rest. You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks. He was right, though Emma didn't know how he could tell. Thank you, Garrett, truly. He nodded again, then turned and strode back outside, the door closing firmly behind him. Emma watched him go. This giant of a man who had shown her more kindness in 1 hour than the entire town of Cedar Falls had in 6 months. Come on, Rose said, tugging her hand again. We'll show you your room. It's real nice. The room was indeed small, but it was clean and warm, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a small dresser, a chair, and a pot-bellied stove that was already burning. A tiny window looked out over the ranch yard. Emma set down the bundle of clothes and sank onto the bed. The mattress was soft, the quilt thick. She ran her hand over it, feeling the careful stitches. Someone had made this with love. Mama made that quilt, Lily said quietly. She made lots of them. She was very talented, Emma said. Do you think she'd mind? Rose asked, her young face worried. You being here, wearing her clothes, sleeping in her house? Emma's heart ached for these motherless girls. She reached out and took both their hands. I think your mama would be happy that your father is helping someone who needs it, and I think she'd be very proud of you both for having such kind hearts. Papa says we're too kind sometimes, Lily said. He says we have to be careful. Your papa is right to want to protect you, Emma said, but being kind is never wrong. You just have to be smart about it too. The girls seemed satisfied with this answer. They chatted on about the ranch, the animals, their daily routines. Emma listened, feeling the knot of anxiety in her chest slowly begin to loosen. She was safe. She had a roof over her head, food in her belly, and work to do. It was more than she had dared hope for. That night, after a supper of roasted chicken and vegetables that Garrett had clearly prepared himself with competent if unrefined skill, Emma lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the walls, she could hear the low rumble of Garrett's voice, reading to his daughters, their giggles and questions, the gentle sounds of a family settling in for the night. She closed her eyes and for the first time in months felt something like hope. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn, years of habit pulling her from sleep. She dressed in one of the wool dresses Garrett had given her. It was a bit loose, as his wife had apparently been a larger woman, but it was warm and clean. She braided her dark hair and made her way to the kitchen. Garrett was already there, stoking the fire in the stove. He looked up when she entered, his blue eyes startled. You're up early. Old habits, Emma said. I thought I'd start earning my keep. He studied her for a moment. You don't have to prove anything on your first day. I want to. She moved toward the stove. Let me make breakfast, please. After a moment, he stepped aside. Emma surveyed the kitchen, taking mental inventory of the supplies. She found eggs, bacon, flour for biscuits. Her hands moved with practiced ease, and soon the kitchen was filled with the smell of cooking food. Garrett sat at the table, watching her. It should have made her nervous, but instead she found his presence oddly comforting. He didn't speak, didn't hover, just sat quietly with his coffee. How long have you been widowed? Emma asked, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. 2 years. Consumption. His voice was flat, but she heard the pain underneath. Took her slow. Months of watching her fade away. I'm sorry. And you? You said 6 months? Pneumonia. It was fast. 3 days from the first fever to... She swallowed. I keep thinking I should be grateful he didn't suffer long, but I'm not. I'm just angry. Garrett's eyes met hers with understanding. Anger is easier than grief. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it is. They fell into silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood loss, who didn't need to fill the air with meaningless words. When the girls tumbled into the kitchen, bright-eyed and chattering, the spell broke. But Emma caught Garrett's eyes over their golden heads, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even the beginning of something more. The days fell into a rhythm. Emma rose early, made breakfast, sent the girls off to their lessons at the small schoolhouse in town, then tackled the housework. She scrubbed floors, beat rugs, mended clothes. She cooked hearty meals and baked bread that made the whole house smell like comfort. Garrett worked the ranch from sunup to sundown. He was a man of few words, but Emma learned to read him. The set of his shoulders told her if he'd had a good day or a bad one. The tiny quirk of his mouth meant he was amused. The way he rubbed the back of his neck meant he was worried. She learned that he was a fair employer, paying his ranch hands well and treating them with respect. That he donated money to the church quietly, never wanting credit. That he read to his daughters every night without fail, no matter how tired he was. She learned that he had built this ranch from nothing, starting with a small plot of land and expanding through years of hard work. That his wife, Mary, had been the daughter of a banker, and her family had never approved of her marrying a common cowboy. That she had died happy anyway, because she had loved him fiercely. Emma tried not to think about what that meant, about the kind of love that transcended social class and family disapproval. Tried not to notice how her heart beat a little faster when Garrett walked into a room. She was his housekeeper, nothing more. She had to remember that, but it was hard to remember when he looked at her with those blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. One evening, about 3 weeks after Emma's arrival, a blizzard rolled in. The wind howled around the house and snow piled up against the windows. Garrett came in from checking on the livestock, his face red with cold, ice crusting his beard. Getting worse out there, he said, stomping snow off his boots. This could last a few days. Emma handed him a cup of hot coffee. Their fingers brushed and she felt a jolt of electricity run up her arm. From the way his eyes darkened, he felt it too. Thank you, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Girls are already in bed, Emma said, pulling her hand back. I made extra stew in case the hands need to come up to the house. They'll stay in the bunkhouse. It's warm enough, and they have supplies. Garrett sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. You've been here almost a month now. Has it been that long? Emma tried to keep her voice light. You settling in all right? Yes. The girls are wonderful. The work is, it's good to feel useful again. You're more than useful, Emma. His voice was quiet but intense. You've brought life back to this house. The girls are happier than they've been in 2 years. Hell, He stopped, his jaw tightening. You're what? Emma's heart was pounding. Garrett set down his coffee cup and took a step toward her. He was so big, so imposing, but Emma didn't feel afraid. She felt something else entirely. Something warm and electric and terrifying. I'm happy, he said simply. For the first time since Mary died, I wake up and don't feel like I'm drowning. His eyes searched hers. That's because of you. Emma's breath caught. Garrett, I know this is too soon, he said, taking another step closer. I know you're still grieving your husband. I know you probably just see me as your employer. But Emma, I need you to know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his large, calloused hand. I need you to know that you're not just my housekeeper. Not to me. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what I feel, she whispered. Everything is so confused. I feel guilty for being alive, for feeling anything other than grief. But when I look at you, she placed her hand over his, holding it against her cheek. When I look at you, I feel warm. I feel safe. Is that wrong? No, Garrett said fiercely. No, Emma, that's not wrong. Life is for the living. Mary would want me to be happy. And your husband, if he loved you, would want the same for you. I barely knew him, Emma admitted, the words tumbling out. Ours was an arranged marriage. Practical. He was a good man, but we didn't have what you had with Mary. And I feel terrible saying it, but I don't know if I'm grieving him or just grieving the life I thought I'd have. Garrett's thumb stroked her cheekbone gently. You don't have to figure it all out right now. We have time. Do we? Emma asked, looking up at him. I'm your employee, Garrett. People will talk. Let them talk. His voice was hard. I don't give a damn what Cedar Falls thinks. I care about you. I care about my daughters. That's all that matters. Emma closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. She had been so cold for so long. Garrett's hand against her skin felt like coming home. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. His voice was gentle. But I'm more scared of letting you go, of watching you leave when you've saved enough money, of never knowing what could have been. Emma opened her eyes and found him looking at her with such naked longing that it took her breath away. This strong, stoic man who never showed emotion was looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever prayed. Kiss me, she heard herself say. Garrett's eyes widened. Emma, please, I need to know if this is real. For a moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, carefully, as if she were made of glass, he lowered his head. His lips brushed against hers, soft and tentative. Emma made a small sound, and Garrett pulled back immediately. Did I hurt you? No. Emma grabbed his shirt, pulling him back. No, you didn't hurt me. Do it again. This time, the kiss was deeper. Garrett's arms came around her, lifting her slightly off the ground. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing closer. He was so warm, so solid. She felt like she could disappear into him and finally be safe. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Why didn't you? Didn't want to scare you off. Didn't want you to think I'd taken you in, expecting anything. His arms tightened around her. I need you to know that's not what this was. I gave you that job because you needed help. This, he pulled back enough to look into her eyes. This is something else entirely. I know, Emma said. I know, Garrett, and I want this too. I'm just scared, I know, so am I. He kissed her forehead gently. But we'll figure it out. Together. The storm raged outside for 3 days. During that time, Emma and Garrett existed in a strange, suspended world. They didn't kiss again. Garrett was too much of a gentleman, too aware of propriety with his daughters in the house. But they talked. Oh, how they talked. Sitting by the fire while the girls played, they shared their stories. Garrett told her about growing up poor in Texas, working cattle drives as a teenager, saving every penny until he could buy his first plot of land, about meeting Mary at a dance and falling in love with her laugh, about building this ranch with his bare hands, wanting to give her the life she deserved. Emma told him about her childhood as a minister's daughter, the strict rules and high expectations, about her parents' death from cholera when she was 20, about her marriage to James, arranged by his family and hers, practical and loveless, but not unkind, about her terror when he died and left her with nothing, not even the house they'd lived in. It had belonged to his brother, who'd wanted her gone within a week. I was invisible, Emma said quietly, in my marriage. In the town, I went to church. I did my duties, but no one really saw me. And after James died, it was like I ceased to exist entirely. Garrett reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. I see you, Emma. I see you. And he did. Emma felt it in the way he watched her move through the house, the way he listened when she spoke, the way his face lit up when she entered a room. Garrett Bishop saw her in a way no one ever had. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. When the storm finally broke, Emma stood at the window and watched the sun emerge from behind the clouds, turning the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland. It's beautiful, she breathed. Garrett came to stand behind her. She could feel the heat of him, even though he wasn't touching her. Yes, he said. But when Emma glanced back, he was looking at her, not the view. Her cheeks flushed. Garrett, marry me. Emma spun around, her eyes wide. What? Marry me, he repeated, his expression serious. I know it's fast. I know you probably think I'm crazy, but Emma, I'm 35 years old. I've been married before. I know what I want, and I want you. I want you in my house, in my bed, in my life. I want you to be a mother to my girls. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Emma's heart was racing. Garrett, it's only been a month. I knew I wanted to marry Mary after 2 weeks, he said. When you know, you know. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. I'm not saying we have to do it tomorrow. We can wait. court properly if that's what you need, but I need you to know my intentions. I'm not interested in you being my housekeeper forever. I want you to be my wife." Emma's hands trembled. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." Garrett took her hands in his, dwarfing them with his size. "Say you'll give me a chance to prove that I can make you happy." Emma looked up into his face, at the hope and fear and longing there. This man, this strong, good man who had saved her when she had nothing, who looked at her like she hung the moon, who made her feel seen, valued, wanted. Was she brave enough to take this chance? "I'll think about it," she whispered. Garrett's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "That's all I ask." He raised her hands to his lips and kissed each one gently. Emma felt warmth spread through her entire body. Yes, she thought. Yes, I could love this man. Maybe I already do. Over the next weeks, Garrett courted her with a tenderness that made Emma's heart ache. It was sweet and old-fashioned and entirely proper, yet charged with an undercurrent of desire that neither of them could deny. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, presenting them shyly like a boy half his age. The first time, he'd cleared his throat awkwardly and held out a bunch of Indian paintbrush and wild roses. "Saw these growing by the creek," he'd muttered, not quite meeting her eyes. "Thought you might like them." Emma had taken them with trembling hands, their fingers brushing. "They're beautiful, Garrett. Thank you." "Not as beautiful as you," he'd said, then turned and strode away quickly, leaving Emma standing there with her heart racing and heat flooding her cheeks. He taught her to ride his gentlest mare, a sweet-natured bay named Clover. Emma had been terrified at first, having never been on a horse, but Garrett's patience was infinite. "I've got you," he'd said, his large hands steadying her at the waist as he lifted her into the saddle. Even through the layers of her dress and petticoats, she could feel the heat of his touch. "I won't let you fall." And he didn't. He led Clover around the corral, one hand on the bridle, the other ready to catch Emma if she wobbled. His blue eyes never left her, watching for any sign of distress. After a week of practice, Emma felt confident enough to ride on her own. Garrett saddled his massive black gelding Thunder, and they rode out across the ranch together. The spring air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. "This is freedom," Emma said, laughing as the wind whipped through her hair. She'd left it down at Garrett's request, and it streamed behind her like a dark banner. Garrett pulled Thunder alongside Clover, his eyes warm. "You look happy." "I am happy." Emma met his gaze. "Happier than I've been in maybe ever." Something shifted in Garrett's expression, became more intense. "Emma, race you to that cottonwood," she called, urging Clover into a canter before she could lose her nerve. She heard Garrett's surprised laugh behind her, then the thunder of hooves as he gave chase. Of course he caught her easily. Thunder was faster, and Garrett was a far better rider. But he let her reach the tree first, pulling up beside her with a grin that transformed his usually serious face. "You cheated," he accused, but he was smiling. "I took initiative," Emma corrected primly, then squealed as Garrett reached over and snatched her right off Clover's back, settling her sideways across his lap on Thunder. "Garrett!" she gasped, clutching at his shirt. "What are you doing?" "Something I've wanted to do for days," he murmured, and kissed her. This kiss was different from their first tentative exploration in the kitchen. This was heat and hunger barely restrained. Garrett's hand tangled in her loose hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss. Emma's fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer, wanting more of this fire that consumed her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I need to marry you soon," he said roughly, "before I lose my mind." Emma laughed breathlessly. "Is that your idea of a romantic proposal?" "No." Garrett pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "My idea of a romantic proposal is telling you that every morning I wake up thinking about you. Every night I go to bed aching for you. When you smile at me across the dinner table, I forget how to breathe. When I hear you singing to the girls, I feel like my heart might burst." His thumb stroked her cheek. "You've become essential to me, Emma. Like air, like water. I can't imagine my life without you in it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Garrett, I know I'm just a rancher. I know I can't give you fancy things or take you to the opera or—" "Stop!" Emma pressed her fingers to his lips. "I don't want fancy things. I don't want the opera. I want this. You, the girls, this ranch, this life." She smiled through her tears. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed." Garrett kissed her again. soft and reverent this time. "Say you'll marry me. Please, Emma. Put me out of my misery." But Emma wasn't quite ready to answer yet. She wanted to savor this courtship, this precious time when everything was new and full of possibility. "Ask me again in 2 weeks," she whispered against his lips. Garrett groaned. "You're going to kill me. 2 weeks isn't so long. 2 weeks is an eternity." But he was smiling as he said it, and Emma knew he understood. She needed time to be sure, to let go of the last vestiges of guilt about moving on from her old life. They rode back to the ranch slowly, Emma still cradled in Garrett's arms, Clover following obediently behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Emma tucked her head against Garrett's shoulder and breathed in his scent. Leather and wood smoke and something uniquely him. "This is perfect," she murmured. "Yes," Garrett agreed, his arms tightening around her. "It is." The girls, sensing something was happening, became even more attached to Emma. They started calling her Miss Emma instead of Mrs. Hartwell, and they peppered her with questions about her childhood, her favorite foods, her dreams for the future. They also became less subtle in their matchmaking attempts. "Papa, don't you think Miss Emma looks pretty today?" Rose would say at breakfast. "Miss Emma, did you notice Papa got a haircut?" Lily would add. "Papa, you should take Miss Emma on a picnic. Mama used to love picnics. Miss Emma, Papa is very strong. He can lift you with one arm. Want to see?" Emma and Garrett bore their daughter's interference with good-natured amusement, exchanging knowing glances over the girls' golden heads. One afternoon, Emma was in the kitchen making pies when Rose and Lily appeared at her elbows. "Miss Emma," Rose began carefully, "can we ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. If you married Papa, you'd be our mama," Lily said, her voice small and hopeful. Emma's hands stilled in the pie crust. She turned to face the girls, seeing the vulnerability in their young faces. These children who had lost their mother so young, who had brought home a stranger because their hearts were too good to ignore suffering. "Is that something you'd want?" Emma asked gently, though her own heart was pounding. "Yes!" both girls cried simultaneously, throwing their arms around her waist. "We already love you," Rose said, her face pressed against Emma's apron. "And Papa is happy again. He smiles now. He didn't smile before you came. He whistles while he works," Lily added. "And he doesn't get that sad look in his eyes anymore." Emma's eyes stung with tears. She knelt down so she could look the girls in the eye, taking both their flour-dusted hands in hers. "I love you both too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So very much. You gave me back my life when you brought me home that day. You showed me that there was still kindness in the world, still hope." "So you'll marry him?" Lily asked, her blue eyes, so like her father's, shining with hope. Emma looked at their expectant faces and felt her heart swell with love so fierce it was almost painful. "I'm thinking about it very seriously." "Think faster," Lily advised with the blunt honesty of childhood. Emma laughed despite her tears. "Why is everyone in such a hurry?" "Because we want you to stay forever," Rose said simply. "We don't want you to leave." Emma pulled both girls into a tight embrace. "I'm not going anywhere, my darlings. Whether your papa and I marry or not, I'm not leaving, I promise." But even as she said the words, Emma knew they weren't entirely true. If she didn't marry Garrett, eventually she would have to leave. She couldn't stay here indefinitely as his housekeeper, not with the feelings growing between them. The temptation would become too great, the impropriety too obvious. No, if she wanted to stay, truly stay, she had to marry him. The question was she brave enough? That evening, after the girls were in bed, Emma found Garrett on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. She brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him on the bench. "The girls talked to me today," she said quietly, "about us getting married." Garrett's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "I didn't put them up to it." "I know." Emma smiled. "They're not exactly subtle, are they?" "No," Garrett agreed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Subtlety has never been their strong suit." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. "They asked me if I'd be their mama," Emma said softly, "if we got married." Garrett turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "What did you say?" "I told them I loved them, that I wasn't going anywhere." Emma met his eyes. "But Garrett, being their mother, that's a sacred responsibility. Your wife, Mary, she was their mother. I don't want to try to replace her." "You wouldn't be replacing her," Garrett said firmly. He set down his coffee and took Emma's hand, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. Mary will always be their mother. Nothing can change that. But Emma, children can love more than one mother. They have room in their hearts for both memories of Mary and a future with you. How can you be so sure? Because I do. Garrett's voice was rough with emotion. I loved Mary with everything I had. She was my first love, the mother of my children, and I'll carry her in my heart until the day I die. He lifted Emma's hand to his lips. But I love you too. Differently, but just as deeply. My heart is big enough for both, and so are my daughters. Emma felt tears slip down her cheeks. I'm so afraid of letting you down, of not being enough. You're more than enough. Garrett cupped her face in his large hands, his touch infinitely gentle. You're everything, Emma. Can't you see that? Before Emma could respond, Garrett kissed her. It started tender but quickly deepened, becoming something raw and desperate. Emma found herself pulled into his lap, her arms winding around his neck as she kissed him back with equal fervor. Marry me, Garrett murmured against her lips between kisses. Please, Emma, marry me. Yes, Emma heard herself say, the word pulled from somewhere deep inside her. Yes, Garrett, I'll marry you. Garrett pulled back, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. You mean it? You're not just saying it because I mean it. Emma smiled through her tears. I love you, Garrett Bishop. I think I have for weeks now, but I was too scared to admit it. But I'm not scared anymore. I want to be your wife. I want to be a mother to Rose and Lily. I want to build a life with you. The smile that spread across Garrett's face was like watching the sun rise. He stood, lifting Emma with him, and spun her around right there on the porch. You've made me the happiest man alive, he said, setting her down but keeping his arms locked around her. I promise I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice. I know I did, Emma said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. You saved my life, Garrett. In every way a person can be saved. No, Garrett said firmly. We saved each other. He kissed her again, deep and thorough, and Emma felt like she was finally, truly home. The next morning, Garrett announced their engagement to the girls at breakfast. Rose and Lily's shrieks of joy could probably be heard all the way in town. We're getting a mama, Lily cried, launching herself at Emma. We told you to think faster, Rose added, joining the embrace. Emma laughed, gathering both girls close. You were right, I'm glad I listened. When's the wedding? Lily wanted to know. Yeah, when? Rose echoed. Garrett and Emma exchanged glances. Soon, Garrett said. As soon as we can arrange it. Tomorrow, Lily suggested hopefully. Not quite that soon, Emma said, smiling, but within the month, I think. If that's all right with you, Garrett? The sooner the better, Garrett agreed, his eyes warm on her face. True to his word, Garrett wanted a quick wedding, but there were preparations to be made. Emma needed a proper dress, and the girls insisted on being flower girls, which meant they needed special dresses too. The week before the wedding, Emma went into town with Garrett and the girls to buy fabric. It was the first time she'd been back to Cedar Falls since the day the twins had found her on that bench, and she felt a flutter of anxiety as they approached. You all right? Garrett asked, noticing her tension. Just wondering what people will say, Emma admitted. Garrett's jaw tightened. I don't give a damn what people say. You're going to be my wife, and anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me. Despite her nervousness, Emma felt a warm glow at his protectiveness. She took his offered arm as they walked into the general store. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Emma heard the whispers start. Is that the homeless woman? Can you believe she's marrying Garrett Bishop? She certainly landed on her feet, didn't she? I heard she seduced him to get her hands on his money. Emma held her head high, refusing to let the gossip hurt her. Garrett's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, a silent show of support. Mrs. Patterson, the store owner's wife, approached with a pinched expression. Mr. Bishop, Mrs. Hartwell, I heard congratulations are in order. Thank you, Garrett said evenly. Mrs. Patterson's gaze raked over Emma with thinly veiled judgment. It must be quite a change for you, Mrs. Hartwell, from sleeping in a stable to becoming mistress of the Bishop Ranch. Emma felt Garrett tense beside her, but she squeezed his arm gently. She could fight her own battles. It is a change, Emma said calmly, but the biggest change is being loved, being valued, being seen as a person rather than an inconvenience. She met Mrs. Patterson's eyes steadily. I was invisible in this town when I was starving and homeless. The only people who saw me, who helped me, were Mr. Bishop and his daughters. So yes, I'm grateful, but not for his money, for his kindness." Mrs. Patterson's cheeks flushed. Several other townspeople who had been listening looked away uncomfortably. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said stiffly, "I suppose everyone deserves a second chance." "Yes," Emma agreed softly, "they do." But see, after they'd made their purchases and were walking back to the wagon, Garrett pulled Emma aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice low and intense. "The way you handled that, you were magnificent." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I just told the truth. You stood up for yourself. For us." Garrett brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Mary used to let people's opinions crush her. She cared so much what others thought. But you know your own worth. It's one of the things I love most about you." Emma's breath caught. It was the first time he'd said specifically what he loved about her, and the words settled into her heart like treasures. "I didn't always," she admitted, "but losing everything taught me that other people's opinions don't keep you warm at night. They don't fill your belly or give your life meaning." She smiled up at him. "You and the girls. You give my life meaning. That's all that matters." Garrett kissed her right there on the street, in full view of anyone who cared to look. Emma heard gasps and more whispers, but she didn't care. Let them talk. She was loved. And that was everything. The wedding preparations consumed the next 3 weeks. Emma sewed her dress by candlelight after the girls were in bed, her fingers flying over the soft, cream-colored silk Garrett had insisted on buying. It was simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high collar, practical for a widow's second marriage, but still beautiful. The girls' dresses were yellow, bright as sunshine, with white ribbons. They preened in front of the mirror, already practicing their flower girl walks. Emma also found herself the recipient of unexpected kindness. Several ranch hands' wives came by to help with preparations, bringing food for the wedding breakfast and wildflowers for decoration. Not everyone in the community had judged her harshly. "We remember what it's like to struggle," one woman, Mrs. Ortiz, said as she helped Emma with her dress fitting. "My husband and I came here with nothing. We understand that sometimes you need help to get back on your feet." "Thank you," Emma said, tears pricking her eyes. "That means more than you know. You're good for Garrett," another woman, young Mrs. Thompson, added. "He's been so sad since Mary passed. It's good to see him smile again." Their acceptance warmed Emma's heart. Maybe she wouldn't be an outcast in Cedar Falls after all. The night before the wedding, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bed, knowing it was the last night she'd spend in this room. Tomorrow night she'd be in Garrett's bed, his wife. The thought sent shivers through her that were equal parts anticipation and nervousness. There was a soft knock on her door. "Miss Emma," came Lily's whispered voice. "Are you awake?" Emma opened the door to find both twins standing there in their nightgowns, looking worried. "What's wrong, sweethearts?" she asked, ushering them inside. "We can't sleep," Rose admitted. "We're too excited about tomorrow, and a little scared," Lily added. Emma sat on the bed and pulled both girls close. "Scared of what? What if getting married changes things?" Rose asked. "What if Papa doesn't have time for us anymore because he's busy with you?" Emma's heart ached. "Oh, my darlings, listen to me. Your Papa loves you more than anything in this world. Nothing, not our marriage, not anything, will ever change that. You will always be his priority." "But you'll be his wife," Lily said. "That's more important than daughters." "No," Emma said firmly. "You three are a package. Your papa fell in love with me partly because of how much he loves you. When I marry him tomorrow, I'm not just becoming his wife, I'm becoming part of your family, all of us together." "Really?" Rose asked, her voice small. "Really?" Emma kissed both their foreheads. "I promise you, girls, I will never try to take your papa away from you, and he would never let me. We're all going to be a family, all 4 of us together." The twins seemed reassured. They snuggled against Emma, and soon their breathing evened out in sleep. Emma held them, marveling at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Garrett Bishop, mother to these precious girls, mistress of the ranch that had become her sanctuary. She had gone from having nothing to having everything. And it all started because two little girls had seen a cold, hungry woman on a bench and decided to help. Garrett found Emma the next morning as she was leaving the girls' room, carefully closing the door so as not to wake them. "They came to you?" he asked softly. "They were worried about tomorrow, about things changing." Emma looked up at him. "I promised them nothing would change between you and them." Garrett's expression softened. "You're going to be an amazing mother to them." "I hope so." Emma felt suddenly shy. "Garrett, about tomorrow night. I need you to know that my marriage to James it wasn't—" "I know," Garrett interrupted gently. "I figured as much. Emma, I don't expect anything from you. We'll take things at your pace, always." Emma felt a rush of love for this gentle giant of a man. "What if my pace is faster than you think?" Garrett's eyes darkened. "Then I'll do my damnedest to keep up." The heat between them was palpable. Emma took a step closer, emboldened by the desire she saw in his face. "Kiss me goodnight," she whispered. Garrett needed no second invitation. He pulled her close, his large hands spanning her waist, and kissed her with a passion that made Emma's knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "One more night," he murmured. "Then you'll be mine, completely mine." "I'm already yours," Emma said. "Have been since that first day, I think. I just didn't know it yet." Garrett kissed her once more, sweet and tender this time, then forced himself to step back. "Get some sleep, soon-to-be Mrs. Bishop. Tomorrow's a big day." Emma smiled. "Good night, Garrett. I love you." "I love you too, Emma, more than you know." The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the spring sunshine pouring through Emma's window like a benediction. She woke early, her stomach full of butterflies, and dressed carefully in the cream silk gown she'd sewn. Mrs. Ortiz and Mrs. Thompson arrived to help her with her hair, styling it in an elegant twist with tiny wildflowers tucked throughout. When Emma looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked happy, radiant even. The haunted, hollow-eyed woman who had sat on that bench months ago was gone. In her place was someone who glowed with contentment and hope. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Ortiz said, her eyes misty. "Garrett's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." The ceremony was held at the small church in Cedar Falls. Emma had wondered if anyone would come, given the gossip, but the pews were surprisingly full. Ranch hands and their families, townspeople who remembered what it was like to struggle, even a few who had once whispered about her, but had been won over by Garrett's obvious devotion. Emma stood at the back of the church, her hand trembling on the arm of Mr. Chen, an elderly rancher who had volunteered to give her away. Through the open doors, she could see Garrett standing at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in his best suit. Then the music started, and Rose and Lily began their procession, carefully scattering flower petals and looking so serious about their important duty that Emma wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. When it was her turn, Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. Garrett turned as she approached, and the expression on his face made her heart stop. He looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer, the fulfillment of every dream. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, and his smile was so full of love that Emma felt it like a physical touch. By the time she reached him, Emma was crying too, happy tears that she made no attempt to hide. "You're beautiful," Garrett whispered as she took her place beside him. "So are you," Emma whispered back, making him grin. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Emma was aware of the minister's words, of repeating her vows in a voice that shook with emotion, of Garrett's strong, sure voice as he promised to love and cherish her for all his days. But mostly she was aware of Garrett's hand holding hers, warm and solid and real, of his eyes never leaving her face, of the way his thumb stroked over her knuckles, a soothing, possessive gesture that made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett cupped Emma's face in his hands with infinite gentleness. "Hello, Mrs. Bishop," he murmured. "Hello, Mr. Bishop," Emma replied, smiling through her tears. Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, and the small church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed half of Cedar Falls. Emma moved through the celebration in a daze of happiness, accepting congratulations and well wishes, laughing at the girls' antics as they danced with wild abandon. But through it all, She was aware of Garrett. His eyes followed her everywhere. Whenever she looked up, he was there, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse race. Finally, as the sun began to set and the guests started to depart, Garrett caught her hand. "Ready to go inside, Mrs. Bishop?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. Emma's breath caught. "The girls, Mrs. Ortiz is taking them for the night, giving us some privacy." Garrett's eyes darkened. "Unless you'd rather wait." "No," Emma said quickly. "I don't want to wait. I want my wedding night with my husband." The smile that spread across Garrett's face was pure, masculine satisfaction. He swept her up in his arms, making Emma squeal, and carried her toward the house amid catcalls and laughter from the remaining guests. "Garrett Bishop, put me down," Emma protested, but she was laughing. "Not a chance," Garrett said. "I'm carrying my bride over the threshold. It's tradition." He kicked open the front door and carried her inside, not stopping until he reached his bedroom. Their bedroom now. He set her down carefully, then closed and locked the door behind them. Emma stood in the middle of the room, suddenly nervous. This was different from her marriage to James. This time she wanted it. Wanted him, but that almost made it more frightening. Garrett seemed to sense her nervousness. He approached slowly, giving her time to adjust. "Emma," he said softly, "look at me." She met his eyes, seeing nothing but love and patience there. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said. "We can just sleep, talk, whatever you need." "I want this," Emma said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I want you, Garrett. I'm nervous." "So am I," Garrett admitted with a crooked smile. "It's been a long time for me, and I want this to be good for you. Want to make you feel cherished and beautiful and desired." He reached out and gently pulled a pin from her hair. "Because you are all of those things." Emma's breath hitched as he removed another pin, then another, until her dark hair tumbled down around her shoulders. Garrett ran his fingers through it, his touch reverent. "I've wanted to do this for so long," he murmured. "You're so beautiful, Emma. Do you know that? Do you have any idea what you do to me?" Emma found her courage. She reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling only slightly. "Show me," she whispered. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the church. Emma wore Mary's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. The girls wore matching yellow dresses and served as flower girls, beaming with pride. The townspeople came, curious to see the homeless widow marrying the wealthy widower. Emma heard the whispers, the speculation. Some said Garrett had been taken in by a gold digger. Others said Emma had seduced him to secure her future. Emma didn't care. Let them talk. She knew the truth. As she stood beside Garrett, his large hand engulfing hers, and repeated her vows, Emma felt a peace she had never known. This was right. This was home. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Garrett kissed her gently, sweetly, in front of everyone. The girls cheered. Some of the townspeople applauded. Others sniffed disapprovingly. Emma smiled against Garrett's lips. She had found her family. Nothing else mattered. The wedding night was tender and careful. Garrett was so gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Emma had been nervous. Her marriage to James had been perfunctory at best, the marital bed a duty rather than a pleasure. But with Garrett, it was different. Everything was different. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he unlaced her gown. Each touch was a question, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Emma didn't want to pull away. She wanted more. "You're trembling," Garrett murmured, his lips against her temple. "Are you cold?" "No," Emma whispered. "Not cold. Just overwhelmed." "Good overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed?" Emma looked up at him, this mountain of a man who was being so careful with her. "Good. Definitely good." Garrett smiled and kissed her deep and slow. His hands skimmed over her body, learning the curve of her waist, the dip of her spine. Emma's own hands explored the broad expanse of his chest, marveling at the strength contained there. "I've got you," he whispered as he held her close. "You're safe with me, Emma. Always." And she was. In his arms, wrapped in his warmth, Emma felt truly safe for the first time in her life. Safe enough to let go, to surrender to the feelings building inside her. When they finally came together, Emma gasped at the sensation. It was nothing like her first marriage. This was fire and connection, and something almost spiritual. Garrett's eyes never left hers, and she saw everything there. Love, desire, reverence, possession. "Mine," he growled as he moved inside her. You're mine, Emma. Yours, she agreed breathlessly. Always yours. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Garrett traced lazy patterns on her skin. What are you thinking? He asked. Emma smiled. I'm thinking about how 6 months ago I had nothing. I was sleeping in a stable, starving, invisible. And now, as she turned to look at him, this beautiful, broken man who had saved her. Now I have everything. A home, a family. You. Garrett's arms tightened around her. You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions, living for the girls, but not really alive myself. You brought me back. We saved each other, Emma said softly. Yes, Garrett agreed. We did. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. 2 broken people made whole. The next morning, Emma woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Garrett's arm draped possessively across her waist. She lay still for a moment, savoring the feeling of being held, being wanted. Morning, Mrs. Bishop. Garrett's deep voice rumbled against her ear. How are you feeling? Emma turned in his arms to face him. His dark hair was mussed from sleep, and he had that stubbled, disheveled look that made her heart race. Happy, she said simply. Happier than I've ever been. Garrett's smile was lazy and satisfied. Good. That's my job now, making you happy. Is that so? Emma teased. And what's my job? Same thing. Garrett kissed her nose. We'll spend the rest of our lives trying to out-happy each other. Emma laughed. That sounds like a competition I can get behind. They spent the morning in bed, talking and touching and discovering each other in the way new lovers do. When they finally emerged, dressed and ravenous, it was nearly noon. The girls came home that afternoon, bubbling with excitement and questions. Are you really our mama now? Rose asked, looking at Emma with shining eyes. If you'll have me, Emma said, kneeling down to the girls' level. We'll have you, Lily declared, throwing her arms around Emma's neck. We prayed and prayed for a new mama, and God sent you. Emma held both girls close, tears streaming down her face. I prayed too, she whispered. I prayed for a family, for somewhere to belong, and God brought me here, to all of you. Garrett watched from the doorway, his own eyes suspiciously bright. When Emma looked up and met his gaze, she saw everything she needed in his expression. Love, pride, belonging, home. The years that followed were not always easy. The ranch had good years and bad years. There were illnesses and injuries, droughts and storms. In the 2nd year of their marriage, Emma lost a baby at 4 months. It was devastating. She'd been so excited to give Garrett a child of their own, to give the girls a sibling. The loss left her hollow and grieving, but Garrett held her through the darkness. He let her cry and rage and mourn. He never told her it was God's will or that she should be grateful for the children she had. He just held her and grieved with her. We'll try again, he said one night, cradling her against his chest. When you're ready, and if we can't have more children, that's all right too. I have you. I have the girls. That's more than I ever dared hope for. Emma pressed her face against his shoulder and wept. For the child she'd lost, for the pain she'd endured, but also in gratitude for this man who loved her so completely. When she became pregnant again a year later, Emma was terrified, but Garrett was her rock, calm and steady and confident. You're strong, he told her. You survived losing everything and being alone. You can survive this, and she did. 9 months later, she delivered a healthy baby boy with Garrett's blue eyes and her dark hair. They named him James, after Emma's first husband, because Garrett said every man deserved to be remembered. 2 years after that came another boy, Samuel, then a daughter, Grace, with golden hair like the twins. The house was always full of noise and laughter and chaos. Rose and Lily doted on their younger siblings, proud of their roles as big sisters. Garrett expanded the ranch, building it into one of the most successful in Montana. But he never forgot where he came from. Every winter he opened the bunkhouse to anyone who needed shelter. He hired men others wouldn't give a chance to, men with pasts, with scars, with demons. He gave them work and dignity and a place to belong. You taught me that, he told Emma one evening, as they watched a new hand ride in, his clothes worn and his eyes haunted. You taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, that kindness matters. Emma squeezed his hand. You already knew that. You just needed reminding. As the children grew, Emma made sure they understood their good fortune. She took them to town, and pointed out people who were struggling, teaching them to see with compassionate eyes rather than judgment. "We help," she told them simply, "because someone helped us when we needed it most." Anu, the twins grew into beautiful young women, kind and strong and full of their father's quiet strength and their mother's compassion. They told the story often of how they'd found their mama on a bench in town, cold and alone, and brought her home. "Best thing we ever did," Rose said at family dinners. "Best stray we ever rescued," Lily added with a grin. James, Samuel and Grace grew up knowing they had two mothers. Mary, who they never met but who they honored through stories, and Emma, who raised them with fierce love. The town of Cedar Falls eventually accepted Emma completely. It was hard to maintain disapproval in the face of her obvious happiness and Garrett's unwavering devotion, and when she started organizing charity drives for widows and orphans, even her harshest critics had to admit she had a good heart. Mrs. Patterson, who had once looked at Emma with such judgment, became one of her closest friends. "I was wrong about you," she admitted one day over tea. "I thought you were just after his money, but I can see now, you love him, really love him." "With all my heart," Emma agreed. "He gave me back my life." "No," Mrs. Patterson said thoughtfully. "You gave each other life. That's what real love does." On their 10th anniversary, Garrett took Emma back to town, to the bench where their daughters had found her. Someone had placed a plaque on it since then. It read, "In memory of those who struggle, may they find kindness, as Emma Hartwell did here." Emma traced the letters with her fingers, tears streaming down her face. "The church ladies had it made," Garrett explained. "They wanted to commemorate, well, your story, as a reminder that everyone deserves compassion." "Do you remember?" he asked. "Of course," Emma said, looking at the familiar bench. "I was sitting right there, freezing and hopeless, and then two little angels came and changed my life." Garrett smiled. "They have good instincts, our girls. The best." Emma leaned against him. "Do you ever regret it? Taking in a stranger because your daughters asked you to?" Garrett turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Emma, marrying you was the second best decision I ever made." "A second best?" "The first was stepping aside and letting you into my house that first day." He kissed her softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, to all of us." Emma's eyes filled with happy tears. "I love you, Garrett Bishop." "I love you too, Emma Bishop." He grinned. "Now come on, we have 6 children waiting at home, and probably destroying the kitchen," Emma added, laughing. "Probably," Garrett agreed cheerfully. They walked back to the wagon, hand in hand. Emma looked back once at the bench, at the place where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. She thought about the woman she'd been then, lost, afraid, invisible, and the woman she was now, loved, valued, seen. The transformation still amazed her sometimes, how quickly life could change, how one moment of compassion could alter everything. "Thank you," she thought, to the girls who had seen her, to the man who had saved her, to whatever force in the universe had brought them all together. As they rode back to the ranch, surrounded by their children's chatter and laughter, Emma smiled. The youngest, Grace, was curled up in her lap, fast asleep. The boys were arguing good-naturedly about who could ride faster. Rose and Lily were singing, their voices harmonizing perfectly. Garrett's hand covered hers where it rested on his thigh. He glanced over at her and winked, and Emma felt her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. She had been homeless and hopeless, invisible to the world, but 2 little girls had seen her, and their cowboy father had given her a home, a family, and a love that would last forever. Years later, when Emma was old and grey, she would sit on the porch of the ranch house and watch her grandchildren play in the yard. Garrett would be beside her, his hand still finding hers automatically, his presence still as solid and comforting as it had been 40 years earlier. And she would remember that cold winter day, sitting on a bench in Cedar Falls, certain that her life was over. She would remember 2 little girls with golden braids and bright blue eyes extending their small hands in kindness. She would remember a giant of a man stepping aside to let a stranger into his home, his life, his heart. And Emma would smile, knowing that she had been saved by love in its purest form, the love of children who didn't know how to hate, and a man who remembered what it meant to need help. She was no longer invisible. She was home, and she would never be alone again.